The diner sat at the corner of Route 9 and Miller Road, a squat brick building with a neon sign that buzzed and flickered even on clear nights. Patty's Place, it was called, though Patty herself had been dead for 15 years, and the current owner was a man named Gus, who spent most of his time in the back office counting receipts and complaining about the cost of bacon. Jenny Lawson had worked there for 3 years. She knew every crack in the linoleum, every squeak in the kitchen door, every regular who came through looking for coffee and conversation. She knew which truckers tipped well and which ones let their hands wander. She knew how to smile when she didn't feel like smiling, how to keep moving when her feet screamed for rest, how to pretend that everything was fine when nothing had been fine for a long time. She was 29 years old, and she was very, very tired. The bruise on her arm was fresh, 3 days old, yellowing at the edges, but still dark at the center where Kyle's fingers had dug in. She'd covered it with a long-sleeved shirt, the way she always did, even though the August heat made the fabric stick to her skin. The bruise on her ribs was worse, a deep purple bloom that ached every time she reached for a plate or bent to wipe a table. That one she couldn't cover, but nobody could see it anyway. Kyle was careful about that. He always hit where the clothes would hide it. It was a Tuesday evening, slow the way Tuesdays always were, when the biker came in. Jenny noticed him immediately. It was hard not to. He was big, broad-shouldered, with gray hair and a beard that looked more distinguished than rough. His leather jacket creaked when he moved, and there was a patch on the back she couldn't quite make out from where she stood behind the counter. He walked with a slight limp, favoring his left leg, and when he sat down at the booth near the window, he did it carefully, like a man whose body had earned its aches. "Coffee?" Jenny asked, approaching with a menu and a smile she'd perfected over 3 years of practice. "Please." His voice was low, rough, the kind of voice that had seen some weather. "Black." She poured his cup and set it in front of him, and that's when it happened. She reached across the table, and her sleeve rode up. It was only an inch, maybe 2, but it was enough. The bruise was visible, the dark center, the yellow edges, the unmistakable shape of fingers wrapped around her arm. Jenny pulled back quickly, tugging her sleeve down, her heart suddenly pounding. She'd been so careful. 3 years of hiding, 3 years of long sleeves and makeup and lies, and now some stranger had seen. She braced herself for the reaction, the awkward look away, the sudden interest in the menu, the pretense that nothing had happened, because that was what people did. They saw, and they chose not to see, because seeing meant getting involved, and getting involved was messy and complicated and nobody's business. But the man didn't look away. He looked at her arm, then at her face, and his gray eyes held something she didn't expect. Not pity, not judgment. Something else, something that felt like recognition. "You okay?" he asked. The question was quiet, direct, carrying no assumption about what the answer would be. "I'm fine." The words came automatically, the same words she'd said 100 times to 100 different people. "Just clumsy. Walked into a door." The man didn't say anything. He just looked at her, and Jenny felt something crack in the wall she'd built around herself. He didn't believe her. She could see it in his eyes. But he wasn't pushing, wasn't demanding, wasn't making her feel small for lying. He was just waiting. "Can I get you anything else?" she asked, desperate to change the subject. "We've got pie. Cherry's good today." "Cherry sounds fine." She retreated to the counter, her hands shaking as she cut the slice. What was wrong with her? He was just a customer, just some biker passing through, probably on his way to somewhere else, someone she'd never see again. It didn't matter what he thought. It didn't matter what he saw. But when she brought the pie back to his table, she couldn't make herself walk away. She stood there, holding the empty tray against her chest like a shield, and the words came out before she could stop them. "It's not a door." The man looked up from his coffee. His face didn't change, but something in his posture shifted, a settling, an attentiveness, like a dog that had caught a scent. "I know," he said. "I don't know why I'm telling you this." Jenny's voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't tell anyone. You looked at me like I've seen it before?" She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "I have." The man gestured to the seat across from him. "Sit down, if you want." Jenny glanced toward the kitchen, where Gus was visible through the window, absorbed in his receipts. The diner was empty, except for an old man nursing coffee in the corner, half asleep over his newspaper. Nobody was watching. Nobody would care. She sat. "My name's Shepard," the man said. "What's yours?" "Jenny." "Jenny." He said it like he was committing it to memory. The person who did that to your arm, he lived with you? My boyfriend, Kyle. The name felt like poison in her mouth. We've been together 4 years. It started about 2 years ago. Small things at first. Grabbing my arm too hard, pushing me when he got angry. I told myself it wasn't that bad, that he was stressed, that he'd change. But he didn't change. No. Jenny felt the tears building and blinked them back. He got worse, and I kept making excuses, kept telling myself I could handle it, kept thinking that if I just did everything right, if I didn't make him angry, it would stop. It doesn't work like that. I know that now. She laughed, a bitter sound that held no humor. I know it every time he hits me, but knowing and leaving are different. Things. Shepard was quiet for a moment. The diner hummed around them. The buzz of the neon sign, the rattle of the air conditioning, the distant clatter of Gus in the back. Normal sounds, safe sounds, sounds that didn't match the conversation they were having. "Why haven't you left?" he asked. The question wasn't accusatory, it was curious, gentle, like he genuinely wanted to understand. "Where would I go?" Jenny spread her hands. "I don't have family. My parents are gone, no siblings. I have maybe $200 saved, and that's only because I hide cash in a tampon box where Kyle won't look. I can't afford first and last month's rent on a new place. I can't afford to miss work while I get settled somewhere else. And Kyle..." She stopped, swallowed. "Kyle says he'll find me. He says if I ever try to leave, he'll kill me. And I believe him." Shepard's jaw tightened. It was a small movement, barely visible, but Jenny saw it. She'd become an expert at reading small movements, the tightening of a fist, the set of a shoulder, the signs that violence was coming. But this was different. This wasn't anger directed at her. This was anger on her behalf. Has he ever... Shepard stopped, started again. "The bruises? How bad does it get?" Jenny hesitated. Then, slowly, she pushed up her sleeve. The bruise on her arm was ugly, but it wasn't the worst. She knew that. Kyle had done worse. Cracked ribs, black eyes, a sprained wrist she'd told the doctor at the ER was from falling down the stairs. But showing even this much felt like stripping naked in public, exposing something she'd kept hidden for so long. Shepard looked at the bruise. His face didn't change, but his eyes went hard, cold and flat, like stones at the bottom of a river. "There's more," Jenny said quietly. "On my ribs, my back. He's careful. He knows where to hit so no one sees." Shepard reached for his phone. He didn't ask permission. He didn't explain what he was doing. He just pulled it out of his jacket pocket and dialed a number, his eyes never leaving Jenny's face. "It's Shepard," he said when someone answered. "I need you to mobilize, full response. I'm at Patty's place on Route 9 and Miller." A pause. "Yeah, it's one of those. How soon can you be here?" Jenny's heart was pounding. "What are you doing?" Shepard held up a finger, one moment, and listened to whatever was being said on the other end of the line. Then, "Good. Bring Ruth, and tell Tiny to get the safe house ready." He hung up and set the phone on the table. "What are you doing?" Jenny asked again. Her voice was shaking now. "Who did you just call?" "My family." Shepard's voice was calm, steady, like a man describing the weather. "The Iron Horsemen. We're a motorcycle club, but we're more than that. We look out for people, people who need help, people who don't have anywhere else to turn." "I don't understand." "You will." He looked at her, and his gray eyes were gentle, despite the hardness she'd seen a moment ago. "Jenny, I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to answer honestly. Not what you think you should say, not what you're afraid to say. Just the truth." Jenny nodded, not trusting her voice. "Do you want out? Really out? Away from Kyle, away from this life, away from all of it?" The question hung in the air between them. Jenny thought about her apartment, about the eggshells she walked on every day, about the constant vigilance that had become so normal she'd forgotten what it felt like to relax. She thought about Kyle's hands on her, the pain that had become as familiar as breathing, the fear that colored every moment of her existence. "Yes," she whispered, "but I don't see how. That's not your problem anymore." Shepard's voice was firm. "Your job is to say yes. My job is to make it happen." "Why would you do this? You don't even know me." "I know enough." He reached across the table and very gently touched the bruise on her arm. "I know that someone is hurting you. I know that you're scared and alone and don't see a way out. And I know that nobody should have to live like that." He pulled his hand back. "That's enough for me." Jenny felt the tears she'd been holding back finally spill over. They ran down her cheeks and she didn't try to stop them. She didn't have the strength to stop them anymore. "They'll be here in an hour," Shepard said. "Maybe less. When they arrive, we're going to take you somewhere safe. A place Kyle can't find, can't reach, can't touch. And then we're going to make sure he never hurts you or anyone else. Again." "How?" The word came out broken, barely audible. Shepard's face was calm, but there was something beneath it. Something old and hard and absolutely certain. "You let us worry about that," he said. "Right now, all you have to do is one thing." "What?" "Believe that you deserve better. Can you do that?" Jenny looked at him, this stranger who had walked into her diner, seen through her lies, and decided without hesitation that she was worth saving. She thought about all the years she'd spent believing she deserved what Kyle did to her, all the excuses she'd made, the blame she'd taken, the slow erosion of everything she'd once been. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I want to try." Shepard smiled. It was a small smile, barely there, but it transformed his weathered face into something almost kind. "That's a start," he said. "That's all any of us need." Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Somewhere in the distance, Jenny could hear the first faint rumble of engines approaching. Help was coming, and for the first time in 2 years, she let herself believe it might actually arrive. The motorcycles filled the parking lot like a rising tide. Jenny stood at the window, watching them come. 10, 15, 20 bikes pulling in, one after another, their engines rumbling in a chorus that shook the glass. The riders, dismounted with practiced ease, pulling off helmets and gloves, gathering in loose clusters as they waited for direction. Most of them were men, but there were women too, hard-faced and capable, wearing the same leather jackets with the same patch on the back. A horseman carrying a shepherd's crook. She could see it now, repeated across 24 backs, a symbol she didn't understand but was beginning to trust. "That's a lot of people," she said, her voice small. "That's family." Shepard had come to stand beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. "When one of us calls, the others come. That's how it works." The door opened and a woman walked in. She was maybe 50, with graying hair pulled back in a long braid and eyes that swept the room with quick efficiency. When she saw Jenny, her expression softened into something that looked like compassion. "You must be Jenny." She crossed the diner and took Jenny's hands in hers, a firm grip, warm and certain. "I'm Ruth. I'm going to help get you somewhere safe." "I don't—" Jenny's voice broke. "I don't understand what's happening." "That's okay. You don't have to understand right now. You just have to trust us." Ruth squeezed her hands. "Can you do that?" Jenny looked at Shepard, at Ruth, at the crowd of strangers gathered in the parking lot. 24 hours ago, she'd been alone. 24 hours ago, she'd believed there was no way out, no hope, no future beyond the apartment where Kyle waited with his fists in his rage. "Yes," she said. "I can try." "Good." Ruth released her hands and turned to Shepard. "What's the situation?" "Boyfriend. Name's Kyle Brennan. He's been beating her for 2 years, maybe longer. She's got bruises on her arms, ribs, probably more she hasn't shown me. He's threatened to kill her if she tries to leave." Ruth's jaw tightened. "Where is he now?" "At home. Their apartment's on Cedar Street, about 10 minutes from here." Shepard pulled out his phone and showed Ruth something on the screen. "I had Red pull his record. 2 prior domestics, both times the charges were dropped. He knows how to work the system. Not anymore, he doesn't." Ruth turned back to Jenny. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to come with me to the safe house. It's about an hour from here, in a location that's not on any map, not in any database. Kyle won't find it. Nobody will find it unless we want them to." "What about my things, my clothes, We'll get you new things. Everything you need." Ruth's voice was firm but kind. "What matters right now is getting you out. The stuff can be replaced. You can't." Jenny thought about the apartment she'd shared with Kyle, the clothes in the closet, the photos on the wall, the small accumulations of a life she'd built piece by piece. She thought about the tampon box with its hidden cash, the only secret she'd managed to keep. "There's money," she said. "In the bathroom. It's not much, but we'll get it." Ruth looked at Shepard. "You want to handle that?" "Already planned on it." Shepard's face was calm, but there was something cold beneath the surface. "I'll take Tiny and Marcus. We'll get her things and have a conversation with Kyle." "What kind of conversation?" Jenny's voice was sharp with sudden fear. We're not going to hurt him." Shepard's eyes met hers. "Not unless he makes us. What we're going to do is explain some things. Explain what happens to men who beat women. Explain what happens if he ever tries to contact you again." He paused. "Kyle's a bully. Bullies only understand one language. We're going to make sure he understands it fluently. Jenny didn't know how to feel about that. Part of her, a part she was ashamed of, wanted Kyle to hurt the way he'd hurt her. Wanted him to feel the fear, the helplessness, the bone-deep terror of being at someone else's mercy. But another part of her, the part that had spent 2 years walking on eggshells, flinched at the thought of more violence. "I don't want anyone to get hurt," she said. "Not even him." "That's because you're a good person." Ruth's voice was gentle. "But sometimes good people need other people to do the hard things for them. That's what we're here for." The next hour passed in a blur. Ruth led Jenny out the back door of the diner, away from the crowd in the parking lot, to a car that was waiting in the alley. It was ordinary, a gray sedan, nothing that would draw attention, and Ruth drove it with the calm competence of someone who had done this many times before. They left the town behind, heading into the countryside on roads that grew progressively smaller and less traveled. Jenny watched the landscape change through the window, suburbs giving way to farmland, farmland giving way to forest, and tried to process what was happening. "How many people have you done this for?" she asked. Ruth glanced at her. "This specifically? Extracting someone from an abusive situation, dozens, maybe 100 over the years. The Iron Horsemen have chapters in 6 states. We coordinate, share resources, help each other out." She paused. "You're not the first person we've rescued, Jenny, and you won't be the last. Why do you do it?" Ruth was quiet for a moment. The road unspooled before them, dark trees pressing close on either side. "Because someone did it for me," she said finally. "A long time ago, I was where you are, trapped in a marriage that was killing me, one bruise at a time. I thought I had no way out. I thought I'd die in that house, and no one would care." She took a breath, and then someone showed up. A stranger, like Shepard was to you. He saw what was happening, and he didn't look away. He helped me escape, got me somewhere safe, gave me a chance to start over. "What happened to your husband?" "He's in prison. Has been for 15 years. Ruth's voice was flat. "Turns out I wasn't the only woman he'd hurt. Once I got out, others came forward. The case against him was overwhelming." Jenny absorbed this. "And now you help other women. To pay it back. To pay it forward." Ruth smiled, a quick flash that softened her weathered face. "That's the rule. When someone helps you, you help someone else. The chain keeps going, person to person, until maybe someday there won't be anyone left who needs saving." They turned off the main road onto a gravel track that wound through the trees. After a few minutes, a house appeared. A modest cabin, well-maintained, with warm light glowing in the windows. "This is it," Ruth said, pulling up to the front. "The safe house. You'll stay here until we figure out the next steps." Jenny looked at the cabin, at the trees surrounding it, at the stars that were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. It was quiet here, really quiet, the kind of silence she'd forgotten existed. No traffic, no sirens, no sound of Kyle's key in the lock. "It's beautiful," she said. "It's safe." Ruth turned off the engine. "That's what matters." They went inside together. The cabin was small but comfortable, a living room with a fireplace, a kitchen stocked with food, a bedroom with a bed that looked softer than anything Jenny had slept on in years. Ruth showed her around, pointing out the bathroom, the emergency supplies, the phone on the wall that was connected to a private line. "If you need anything, you call that number," Ruth said. "Someone will answer day or night. You're not alone here, Jenny. Even when no one's physically present, you've got people watching out for you." Jenny nodded, overwhelmed. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to thank me. Just get some rest. Eat something. Let yourself breathe for the first time in 2 years." Ruth moved toward the door. "I'll be back in the morning. We'll talk about what comes next." She left, and Jenny stood in the middle of the cabin, listening to the car pull away. The silence pressed in around her, not the threatening silence of the apartment, where quiet meant Kyle was brooding and violence could come at any moment, but something else, something peaceful. She walked to the window and looked out at the trees, at the stars, at the darkness that felt protective instead of threatening. Somewhere out there, Shepard and his brothers were having a conversation with Kyle. Jenny didn't know what that meant exactly, didn't know what would happen, what they would say, what Kyle would do. But for the first time in 2 years, that uncertainty didn't feel like fear. It felt like freedom. She sank onto the couch, pulled a blanket over her shoulders, and let herself cry. Not the quiet, stifled tears she'd learned to hide from Kyle. Real tears, loud and messy, the kind that came from a place so deep she'd forgotten it existed. When the tears finally stopped, she felt empty. Not the bad kind of empty, the kind that came from Kyle's cruelty, the hollowing out of everything she'd been. This was different. This was the empty that came after. Something had been released, the empty that made room for something new. She lay down on the couch, pulled the blanket up to her chin, and closed her eyes. For the first time in 2 years, she slept without dreaming of fists. Ruth came back the next morning, as promised. She brought breakfast, eggs, bacon, fresh bread from a bakery Jenny had never heard of, and they sat together at the small kitchen table while the morning light filtered through the windows. Jenny ate slowly, savoring every bite. She couldn't remember the last time she'd had a meal without watching Kyle's face, without calculating his mood, without preparing herself for whatever might come next. "How did you sleep?" Ruth asked. "Better than I have in years." It was true. Jenny had woken up disoriented, not recognizing the ceiling above her, and then the memory had come flooding back. Not a dream. Real. She was safe. What happened last night? With Kyle? Ruth set down her coffee cup. "Shepard and the boys went to your apartment. Kyle was there. They had a conversation." "What kind of conversation?" "The kind where Kyle learned some things about himself." Ruth's voice was matter of fact. "He learned that there are people in this world who take a very dim view of men who beat women. He learned that those people have a long reach and a longer memory. And he learned that if he ever tries to contact you, ever, for any reason, he will deeply regret it." Jenny felt a chill run down her spine. Did they hurt him? No, they didn't have to. Ruth smiled, but there was something cold in it. "Kyle's a coward, Jenny. That's what bullies are, underneath all the bluster. When he was faced with men who weren't afraid of him, who wouldn't back down, who made it very clear what would happen if he didn't cooperate, he folded, signed a statement admitting to the abuse, agreed to stay away from you permanently, even helped pack up your things." She gestured toward the door, and Jenny noticed for the first time the boxes stacked on the porch. Her things, the accumulated fragments of her life, rescued from the apartment she'd thought she would die in. "The tampon box?" Jenny asked. "Safe and sound, $243. Ruth reached into her pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Tiny counted it twice. Said he was impressed. Most people can't hide anything from someone like Kyle. You're smarter than you give yourself credit for. Jenny took the envelope, feeling the small weight of the bills inside. It wasn't much. It wouldn't buy her a new life, but it was hers. The one thing she'd managed to keep from Kyle. The one secret he'd never discovered. "What happens now?" she asked. "That depends on you." Ruth leaned back in her chair. "You can stay here as long as you need. Days, weeks, months, whatever it takes for you to feel ready. We'll help you find a job, an apartment, whatever you need to start over. We have connections all over the state. People who hire women in your situation, landlords who don't ask too many questions. And Kyle? Kyle won't be a problem. We have eyes on him. If he tries to find you, we'll know before he gets within 50 miles of this place." Ruth paused. "But honestly, I don't think he will. Men like Kyle are predictable. They're brave when they have power, when they're facing someone weaker. Take that away, and they crumble. He's scared now, Jenny. Scared of Shepard, scared of the club, scared of what will happen if he steps out of line. That fear will keep him in check." Jenny wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe that the nightmare was really over, that she could start fresh, that Kyle would fade into the past like a bad dream. But 2 years of conditioning didn't disappear overnight. Some part of her was still waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the violence to come, for the brief glimpse of safety to be snatched away. Ruth seemed to read her thoughts. "It takes time," she said gently. "The fear doesn't go away just because the danger does. Your body, your mind, they've been in survival mode for so long, they don't know how to stop. That's normal. That's expected. And it will get better, slowly, as you rebuild." "How do you know?" "Because I've been where you are. Because I've watched dozens of women go through the same thing." Ruth reached across the table and took Jenny's hand. "The first few weeks are the hardest. You'll feel lost, uncertain, like you don't know who you are without the fear defining you. But underneath all that, there's still a person, the person you were before Kyle, the person he tried to destroy. She's still in there, Jenny. She's just been hiding. Give her time to come back out." Jenny felt the tears building again. She'd cried more in the past 24 hours than she had in the past 2 years combined. But these tears felt different. Not the tears of hopelessness, but of something else. Relief, maybe, or the first stirrings of hope. I don't know who that person is anymore, she whispered. Then you get to find out. Ruth squeezed her hand. That's the gift you've been given, Jenny. A second chance, a blank slate. You get to decide who you want to be, without anyone else's voice in your head telling you what you're worth. The days that followed were strange and quiet. Jenny stayed at the cabin, venturing outside only to walk in the woods or sit on the porch watching the birds. Ruth came by every day, bringing food and company and the slow, patient work of rebuilding a shattered person. They talked about everything and nothing, about Ruth's past, about Jenny's childhood, about books and movies and dreams they'd had before life got complicated. Shepard came once, near the end of the first week. He sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and told Jenny what had happened with Kyle, the conversation, the confession, the terms of the agreement he'd signed. Kyle had been warned in no uncertain terms what would happen. If he violated any of it, he wouldn't get a second warning. He's moving, Shepard said, leaving the state. His sister lives in Florida, and he's decided it's a good time to visit her. His mouth curved in a smile that held no warmth. Indefinitely. You scared him that badly? We made him understand his options. Shepard set down his cup. Kyle's not a complicated man, Jenny. He's a bully who found someone he could control, and he enjoyed the control. Men like that. They don't change, don't get better, don't see the error of their ways. All you can do is make the cost of continuing too high. That's what we did. Jenny nodded slowly. Part of her wanted to know the details, what exactly they'd said, what threats they'd made, whether Kyle had been as terrified as she'd been all those nights when his temper turned dark. But another part of her didn't want to know, didn't want to carry that weight, those images. She'd had enough violence in her life. She didn't need to imagine more. Thank you, she said, for everything. I still don't understand why you did it, why any of you did it, but thank you. Shepard was quiet for a moment. His gray eyes studied her face, and she had the sense that he was seeing something beyond the surface, the bruises that were fading, the fear that was slowly loosening its grip, the person beginning to emerge from the wreckage. I had a sister, he said finally, younger than me by 5 years. Beautiful girl, smart, funny, the kind of person who lit up every room she walked into. She married young, to a man who seemed perfect. Charming, successful, devoted. He paused. It took us years to see what he really was. By then, it was too late. Jenny's heart clenched. What happened? He killed her. The words were flat, matter-of-fact, carrying a pain so old it had calcified into something harder. Beat her one too many times and she didn't get up. He's in prison now. Will be for the rest of his life. But that doesn't bring her back. Doesn't undo what happened. I'm so sorry. It was a long time ago. Shepard picked up his coffee cup again, turning it slowly in his hands. After she died, I made a promise. Every woman I could help, I would help. Every person trapped the way she was trapped, I would try to reach. It wouldn't bring her back. Nothing would. But maybe it would mean her death wasn't completely pointless. Maybe some good could come from all that pain. He looked at Jenny, and his gray eyes were gentle despite the hardness she'd seen before. That's why I stopped at the diner. That's why I made the call. That's why any of us do what we do. Because every person we save is a victory against the darkness. Every life we protect is proof that things can be different. He set down the cup. You're part of that now, Jenny. Part of the chain. Someday, when you're ready, you'll help someone else, and the chain will keep going. Jenny thought about that. She thought about the bruises on her arm, the years of fear, the moment she'd shown a stranger her wounds, and he'd simply picked up the phone. She thought about Ruth, about the safe house, about the community that had materialized out of nowhere to save a waitress who had nothing to offer in return. I want that, she said. I want to be part of the chain. Shepard smiled, a real smile this time, warm and approving. You already are, he said. You just don't know it yet. The weeks at the safe house stretched into a month, then 2. Jenny marked the days not by a calendar, but by the changes in herself, the way she stopped flinching at sudden noises, the way she began to sleep through the night, the way she started to recognize her own face in the mirror again. Ruth came by regularly, bringing supplies and conversation and the steady, patient presence that Jenny had come to rely on. They talked about everything. Ruth's years with the Iron Horseman, Jenny's childhood before Kyle, the futures they'd imagined for themselves when they were young, and the world seemed full of possibility. I wanted to be a teacher. Jenny said one afternoon, sitting on the porch with a cup of tea growing cold in her hands. Back in high school, that was my dream. English teacher, maybe, or history. I loved books, loved the way they could take you somewhere else, make you someone else for a few hours. What happened? Life. Jenny shrugged. My dad got sick, and I had to drop out of college to help my mom. Then he died, and she fell apart, and by the time I got myself sorted out, it felt too late. I was 23, working at the diner, and Kyle walked in one day and told me I was beautiful. She paused. I thought that was enough. I thought if someone thought I was beautiful, everything else would fall into place. It wasn't your fault. Ruth's voice was firm. What Kyle did to you, none of that was because you made bad choices. It was because he was broken, and he wanted to break you too. I know that. In my head, I know that. Jenny set down her tea. But sometimes the head and the heart don't talk to each other. Sometimes I still hear his voice, telling me I'm worthless, telling me no one else would ever want me, telling me I deserved everything he did. That voice will fade. Ruth reached over and squeezed her hand. It takes time. It takes work. But one day you'll wake up and realize you haven't heard it in weeks, and then months. And eventually, it'll be nothing but a distant memory, something that happened to someone else a long time ago. Jenny wanted to believe that. She was starting to believe it in small ways, on good days, but the bad days still came, days when the fear crept back in, when she found herself scanning every face for Kyle's features, when the smallest thing could send her spiraling into a panic that felt endless. On those days, she called the number Shepard had given her. Someone always answered, sometimes Ruth, sometimes Shepard, sometimes voices she didn't recognize, but who spoke to her with the same calm patience. They talked her through the panic, reminded her she was safe, stayed on the line until she could breathe again. You're not alone, they always said. Whatever you're feeling, you don't have to feel it by yourself. It was the simplest thing, the most basic human kindness, and it meant more to Jenny than she could ever express. At the end of her second month at the safe house, Ruth arrived with news. There's a job opening, she said, at a community center in Springfield. Administrative work mostly, answering phones, filing paperwork, helping people who come in looking for resources. It's not glamorous, but it's steady, and the people who run it are good. They're friends of the club. Jenny felt a flutter of anxiety in her chest. Springfield was 2 hours away, far enough from her old life to feel like a fresh start, but still terrifyingly new. She'd been at the safe house so long it had started to feel like home. The thought of leaving, of starting over somewhere unfamiliar, made her stomach clench. I don't know if I'm ready, she said. Nobody's ever ready. Ruth smiled. Ready is a myth. All we can do is take the next step when it appears and trust that we'll figure it out as we go. What if I can't do it? What if I fall apart? Then you call us and we help you pick up the pieces. Ruth leaned forward. Jenny, you're stronger than you think. You survived 2 years with Kyle. You had the courage to show a stranger your bruises and ask for help. You've spent 2 months healing, rebuilding, becoming someone new. She paused. You can do this. I know you can. Jenny thought about the community center, about Springfield, about the life waiting for her beyond the safe walls of the cabin. She thought about all the reasons to say no, the fear, the uncertainty, the voice in her head that still whispered she wasn't good enough. Then she thought about Shepard's sister, about Ruth's past, about the chain of kindness that had brought her here and would carry her forward if she let it. Okay, she said. I'll do it. The move happened quickly after that. Ruth helped her pack the few things she'd accumulated, clothes from donation bins, books from the library, a quilt that one of the Iron Horseman's wives had made especially for her. They drove to Springfield on a clear autumn day, the leaves turning gold and red along the highway, the future unfolding ahead of them like a road with no end. The apartment was small but clean, a studio on the 3rd floor of an old building, with windows that looked out on a park where children played and dogs ran, and ordinary life happened in all its messy, beautiful chaos. Ruth helped her unpack, showed her around the neighborhood, introduced her to the landlord and the neighbors and the woman who ran the coffee shop on the corner. You're going to be okay, Ruth said when it was time to leave. You know that, right? Jenny nodded, not trusting her voice. Call me anytime, day or night. If you need anything, if you're struggling, if you just want to talk. Ruth pulled her into a hug, firm and warm and full of all the things words couldn't capture. You're family now, Jenny. That doesn't change just because you've moved. She drove away, and Jenny stood at the window watching until the car disappeared around the corner. Then she turned and looked at her apartment, the first place that had ever been truly hers, and let herself feel the enormity of what had happened. 2 months ago, she'd been trapped in a nightmare with no way out. 2 months ago, she'd believed she would die in that apartment on Cedar Street. Another statistic, another woman who didn't get away. Now she was here, free, alive, starting over. The job at the community center began the following Monday. Jenny arrived early, nervous and uncertain, and was met by a woman named Patricia, who ran the place with a combination of fierce efficiency and boundless warmth. Patricia showed her around, introduced her to the other staff, explained the work they did, connecting people with resources, helping families in crisis, providing a safe space for those who had nowhere else to turn. "Ruth told me about your situation," Patricia said when they were alone in her office. "You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but I want you to know, you're not alone here. Half the staff has been through something similar. We understand." Jenny felt something loosen in her chest. "Thank you for giving me a chance." "Everyone deserves a chance." Patricia smiled. "That's what we believe here. That's why we do what we do." The work was good, meaningful. Jenny answered phones and filed paperwork, but she also talked to the people who came in. Women fleeing abuse, families struggling to make ends meet, individuals who had fallen through the cracks and needed someone to help them climb back out. She listened to their stories, connected them with resources, offered the same kindness that had been offered to her. It wasn't easy. Some days were overwhelming, so much need, so much pain, so many people drowning in circumstances beyond their control. But even on the hardest days, Jenny felt something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. She felt like she mattered. Shepard called at the end of her first week, checking in the way he did with everyone the club had helped. "How's it going?" he asked. "Better than I expected." Jenny was sitting by the window, watching the sun set over the park. "The job is good. The apartment is good. I'm starting to feel like myself again, whoever that is." "You're finding out. That's the hard part." She could hear the smile in his voice. "Ruth says you're doing great. Patricia, too. They're impressed." "They're easy to impress." "No, they're not." Shepard's voice was serious now. "They've seen a lot of people come through, Jenny. A lot of broken people trying to rebuild. Not all of them make it. The ones who do, they have something, a spark, a refusal to give up." He paused. "You have that. I saw it the first day in the diner. That's why I made the call." Jenny felt her eyes sting with tears. "I don't feel strong. Most days I still feel like I'm barely holding on. That's what strength looks like. Holding on when everything in you wants to let go." The line was quiet for a moment. "You're doing good, Jenny. Don't forget that. And if you ever need us for anything, we're here." They said goodbye, and Jenny sat in the fading light, thinking about everything that had led her here. The bruises on her arm, the stranger in the diner, the phone call that had changed everything. She thought about Kyle, somewhere in Florida, scared into a new life by men who wouldn't let him hurt anyone else. She thought about Shepard's sister, who hadn't gotten away, whose death had set this whole chain in motion. She thought about Ruth and Patricia and all the people who had shown her that kindness wasn't just a nice idea. It was a force, a power, something that could reach into the darkest places and pull people back into the light. She was part of that now, part of the chain, and she was just getting started. 3 years later, on a Tuesday evening that felt like an echo of another life, Jenny Lawson walked into a diner on the outskirts of Springfield. It wasn't Patty's Place. That diner was 100 miles and a lifetime away, but it had the same feeling. The buzzing neon sign, the worn linoleum, the smell of coffee and grease, and the particular exhaustion of people who worked too hard for too little. Jenny knew that feeling. She'd lived it for years. She wasn't here for the food. She'd gotten the call that morning from a woman at the community center, a woman she'd helped 6 months ago, who still checked in from time to time. "There's a girl at Rosie's diner," the woman had said. "Young, maybe 22, 23. She's got bruises she's trying to hide. I saw them when her sleeve rode up. She looks scared, Jenny, the way I used to look." So Jenny had come, not as an official representative of anything, not with a plan or a script, just as herself, a woman who had been where this girl was, who understood what it felt like to be trapped and terrified and convinced there was no way out. She sat down at the counter and ordered coffee. The waitress who brought it was young, as the caller had said, pretty, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and eyes that held the particular blankness of someone who had learned to hide their pain. Her name tag said Maria, and when she reached across to set down the cup, Jenny saw it. The bruise, dark at the center, yellowing at the edges, the unmistakable shape of fingers wrapped around a wrist. Maria saw Jenny looking and pulled back quickly, tugging her sleeve down. Her face flushed with the shame Jenny remembered so well, the shame of being caught, of being seen, of having your secret exposed to a stranger. "I'm fine," Maria said before Jenny could speak. "Just clumsy." Jenny nodded slowly. She didn't push, didn't pry. She just looked at Maria with eyes that said, "I know. I understand. You don't have to lie to me." "I used to be a waitress," Jenny said. "A few years ago, at a diner a lot like this one." Maria's expression flickered, curiosity beneath the blankness, the faintest spark of connection. "Yeah? Yeah, it was hard work. Long hours, sore feet, customers who didn't always treat you right." Jenny wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "And I had someone at home who made it harder. Someone who hurt me, who made me believe I deserved it, who convinced me there was no way out." Maria's face went pale. Her eyes darted toward the kitchen, toward the door, the reflexive scan of someone always calculating escape routes. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. Her voice was flat, practiced. "I know you don't." Jenny pulled a card from her pocket, the same card Shepard had given her 3 years ago, worn soft now from handling but still legible. The horseman with the shepherd's crook, the phone number that had changed her life. "But if you ever want to talk, if you ever need help, you call this number. Someone will answer, day or night." She set the card on the counter between them. Maria stared at it. Her hands were trembling. Jenny could see them shaking, the way her own hands had shaken that night in Patty's place, when a stranger had looked at her bruises and simply dialed his phone. "Who are you?" Maria whispered. "Someone who got out." Jenny stood and left a 20 on the counter, far more than her coffee was worth. "Someone who wants you to know that you're not alone, that there are people who will help, who won't judge, who have been exactly where you are." She paused at the door and looked back. "You don't have to decide anything right now. Just keep the card, and know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, help will be there." She walked out into the evening air, leaving Maria standing behind the counter with the card in her hands. Jenny didn't know if she would call. Some people did, some people didn't. Some people stayed trapped for years longer. Some people never got out at all. That was the hard truth Ruth had taught her early on. You couldn't save everyone. You could only extend your hand and hope they'd take it. But sometimes they did. Sometimes that card, that number, that moment of being seen by someone who understood, it was enough to crack the wall, enough to let a sliver of light into the darkness, enough to start a chain that would stretch forward in ways no one could predict. Jenny drove back to Springfield, to the apartment she'd made her own, to the life she'd built from the wreckage of her past. She thought about Maria, about the fear in her eyes, about the bruises she was hiding. She thought about herself 3 years ago, trapped, hopeless, convinced that no one would ever help her. And she thought about Shepard, walking into Patty's place on a Tuesday evening, seeing a waitress with bruises on her arm, and making a choice that changed everything. She was home by dark. The apartment was warm and quiet, filled with the small accumulations of a life rebuilt, books on the shelves, photos on the walls, a quilt on the couch that Ruth had given her the first Christmas after her escape. She made tea and sat by the window, watching the lights of the city sparkle in the darkness. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ruth. "Heard you went on a call today. How'd it go?" Jenny typed back. "Too early to tell, but I left the card. That's all we can do." Ruth's response came quickly. "That's everything. The rest is up to her." Jenny set down the phone and thought about the chain. Shepard's sister, whose death had started it all. Shepard himself, who had turned his grief into purpose. Ruth, who had been saved and now spent her life saving others. And Jenny, once a waitress with bruises, now part of something larger than herself. The chain would continue. It had to. Every person who was helped became someone who could help others. Every act of kindness rippled outward, touching lives that the original giver would never see. That was the power of it. That was what made it matter. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Jenny's heart jumped. She answered on the second ring. "Hello?" A pause. Then a voice. Young, female, trembling. Is this the number? The one on the card?" Jenny closed her eyes, felt the weight of the moment settle around her like a blanket. "Yes," she said. Her voice was calm, steady, the voice that Ruth had been for her, that Shepard had been before that. "This is the number, and you're not alone. Whatever you're going through, whatever you're afraid of, you don't have to face it by yourself." A sob on the other end of the line. Maria's voice broken and desperate. "I need help. Please, I need help." "Then help is what you'll get." Jenny was already reaching for her keys, her coat, the bag she kept packed for moments exactly like this. "Tell me where you are. I'm on my way." She drove through the night toward a diner on the outskirts of Springfield, toward a young woman with bruises on her arms who had finally found the courage to call. The road stretched ahead of her, dark and uncertain, but Jenny wasn't afraid. This was what she did now. This was who she was. 3 years ago, a stranger had walked into a diner and seen her bruises. He hadn't looked away. He hadn't pretended not to notice. He'd simply reached for his phone and dialed his club, and in doing so, he'd changed the entire trajectory of her life. Now it was her turn. Now she was the one who answered the call, who showed up in the darkness, who extended a hand to someone drowning and said, "You're not alone." The chain continued. Link by link, life by life, kindness by kindness. And Jenny Lawson, survivor, helper, part of something larger than herself, drove through the night toward a woman who needed her, ready to add another link, ready to pass it on. The diner appeared in the distance, its neon sign buzzing against the dark sky. Jenny pulled into the parking lot and saw Maria standing by the door, a bag clutched to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Jenny got out of the car and walked toward her. She didn't rush, didn't overwhelm. She just opened her arms and Maria fell into them, sobbing with the relief of someone who had finally found help. "It's okay," Jenny whispered, holding her close. "You're safe now. I've got you." Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. Somewhere in the distance, an engine rumbled. Maybe a motorcycle, maybe just a truck on the highway. It didn't matter. What mattered was this moment, this connection, this link in the chain that would never break. Maria pulled back, wiping her eyes. "How do I repay you?" Jenny smiled, the same smile Shepard had given her, the same smile Ruth had given her, passed down through the chain like a gift. "You don't repay me," she said. "You pass it on. Someday, when you're strong enough, you help someone else. That's how it works. That's how it keeps going." Maria nodded, not fully understanding yet, but she would. In time, she would. They got in the car together, and Jenny drove toward the safe house, toward safety, toward the beginning of a new life. Behind them, the diner faded into the darkness. Ahead of them, the road stretched on, full of possibility. The chain continued, and it would never end.